Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. This is Kyla speaking, and we have Nia here who may chime in. And then we have a really exciting guest for you guys. We have professional world tour bike racer turned professional bike rider, Ted King. He is the co-founder of UnTapped Maple, which I'm sure many of you guys have utilized, seen at races, but also the host of Rooted Vermont and the King Challenge, and has podiumed in quite a few races I'm sure you guys have heard of, such as the Last Best Ride, SBT Gravel, Unbound. So just a few podiums, to name a few. Thank you, Ted, for joining us.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. It's been a little bit of time in the making, but very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Ted's on an epic road trip for you guys listening. He's just touring the United States, it seems like.
Yeah, accurate.
What states have you been to so far?
So my wife and two young children and I live in Vermont. We picked up the van in early August and then basically beelined it to the most of the way to the West Coast. We were making our way to the Last Best Ride. So that was up in Montana. From there, we went to see my wife's whole family in Seattle, and then we started backtracking east. We did Rebecca's Private Idaho, which is a great race in Idaho, to Park City, Utah. And now this conversation from my end comes to you from Boulder, Colorado.
Yes. Yeah. And getting some elevation exposure, I would imagine. So.
Oh, big time. It is. It's entertaining I use Whoop quite a bit, and to see my resting heart rate just skyrocket as I sleep at 9,000 feet is fascinating. Anyway, yes, getting some inadvertent altitude training in.
Yeah. How's the air quality where you are right now, Ted?
Air quality here is excellent. Thankfully, we've dodged a couple bullets as we were getting out of Idaho and then Park City. But I mean, this time of year it's so unpredictable, and you just sort of cross your fingers that you get some good air. But it has been raining quite a bit in Colorado, so I feel pretty lucky right now.
Good. Some hero dirt for you over there, hopefully.
Oh, exactly.
That's awesome. So can we kind of go back in time a little bit and tell us how you just got into cycling when you did? I mean, when was it? How did that happen?
Sure. I grew up in New England doing what I'd call traditional New England sports, a lot of hockey, a lot of time on snow skiing. But I was a ball sport athlete for all intents and purposes. I really wasn't into endurance sports. I then went off to Middlebury College, which is up in Vermont, and I finished my ball sport career, so to speak. And I have an older brother, 3 years my senior, who is racing the Collegiate National Cycling Championships hosted by University of Vermont.
Awesome.
So I went and watched part of that race and thought, oh, that's kind of cool. My brother, he won that race, I should point out.
Nice.
And so I thought, I probably can share some of his hand-me-downs and have some of his genetically predisposed genes. And basically just got into cycling in college.
Nice.
And that opened up, it opened up a multitude of doors. I got into the sport thinking, okay, I'll ride for a little bit, I'll race for a little bit. And then the first job out of college was racing domestically. Did that for 3 years, which is, it's a bit of a bachelor sport. I mean, you're hopping like city to city all across the country, sleeping on couches. It's not terribly professional, but it was a fun couple of years. And then my success there brought me to race in Europe for the next 7 years. And racing the world tour, which is as big as it gets. Raced, I say name a bike race and I've done it. Lived in Spain for 5 of those years and Italy for 2 of those years, and hung it up, so to speak, at the end of 2015. And then that opened up. I mean, that's sort of the end of phase one. It opened up. I came back to the States, and so began what I call this gravel cycling career, which is very unplanned, very unintended. Even in 2016, that first year, you wouldn't have described anything as gravel. It's just this evolution that has happened very, very recently. But it's extended my time in the sport in a really positive way.
Yeah. The gravel community and world, seems to be something that is, it seems like a lot of people who have come from road more so go to gravel. Do you see less mountain bikers transition to gravel or?
I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's a combination of, I think more people participate in road racing,
Mm.
and therefore, just by sheer
Yeah.
quantity of riders, you see that migration happening. Furthermore, domestic road racing is just on its deathbed right now.
Yeah.
My final years racing domestically was 2008, and I call that the end of the heyday. And so now
Mm.
here we are, 15 years later, and it's just really struggling.
Mm-hmm.
The sport of cycling is always in cycles, no pun
Mm-hmm.
intended, and it's certainly in a low point. So as a result, people are looking for ways to ride a bike elsewhere, and gravel is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from mountain bikers, because some of the best gravel cyclists now are mountain bikers turned gravel cyclists. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool. It is, that's the point, is that gravel is this melting pot of
Yeah.
all types of cycling, and it's a blast.
Yeah. It's when I was at RPI the other weekend, it seems like that was my first time going to a gravel event, but people seemed, all the people just seemed so nice. And that could be, I don't know, Idaho people, but also I met so many people from the Bay Area. Was
Mm-hmm.
pretty, and well, a lot of people there too. It's an event for a good cause as well. So I think that brings a good group of people as well. But yeah, just tons of just cool, nice people. I was super pleased with the experience for sure. So with the kind of cycling career going from like that high level and then shifting to gravel, what has your nutrition and hydration journey looked like? Has there been anything where, I mean, when you started, was there anything that you changed that you were like, oh my goodness, this makes a big difference, or this is hurting my performance?
I mean, man, that is a spectrum, because now I've been riding and racing a bike for 20 plus years. Getting into cycling in the, call it, early 2000s, and cycling in general puts a very high precedent on low weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the sport of cycling can be founded on a strength to weight ratio. It's how much power you can produce and how little can you weigh. So especially in those first even 15 years, and so the majority of my road racing career was, how light can you get? And so there's sort of I never had a formal eating disorder, but I would probably say that most professional cyclists have some shade or shadow of an eating disorder, and it's sort of micro starvation or whatever you might call it, and then obviously full-blown cases. So let me think. I mean, certainly over the course of those 2 decades, it's been a movement towards real foods, whole foods. Looking at macronutrients rather than trying to weigh your food and look at all of the minutia. I'm a firm believer, especially now, in eating food. I mean, food has always been such a big passion of mine. I love cooking. That was a really cool thing in living in Spain and Italy was, you don't just go to the grocery store. Your day revolves around training, but then also going to the market, and your where you get your vegetables is a different store from where you get your meat, is a different store from where you're going to get your seafood. And so that was a really fun experience. And that's a spectrum as well, because there's plenty of professional cyclists who will eat rice and chicken every single night for months and months and months on end. And for whatever magic reason, it sort of works for them. So, I mean, I guess sort of to wrap up the question, if you consider the first portion of my career, everything that I did in road racing, like I said, that wrapped up at 2015. And then beginning in 2016 was what I would consider very much a retirement from cycling. And so I no longer had to obsess about weighing very, very little. In that meantime, over the past 7 years, gravel has become very popular. And so now there's a high precedent on performance again. But the point being, I was lucky enough to stop paying attention to feeling light and not needing to eat or needing to starve myself. So eating a lot and fueling right, I actually noticed the difference, that I was able to continue to produce a lot of power and ride really well.
Awesome.
Even though, okay, I'm not racing at the Tour de France level anymore, but you can look at your power numbers, which is a metric of how much intensity you're putting into the bike. And because I was actually fueling well and not perpetually starved, my numbers continue to be incredibly strong.
Awesome. I love hearing that. No, I love hearing that. I think that's important too, to point out. I mean, we see that too with our runners. I mean, the whole lighter, trying to be lighter, to be faster. And I think, there's definitely a fine line or a sweet spot for each individual, right? And, if we can fuel the machine, we can get those performance improvements for sure. So when you kind of started fueling yourself, did you specifically start bringing in like more carbohydrates or more protein, or was there anything in particular, or was kind of just everything across the board?
I think I'd say everything. I mean, I continued to want to eat well. There was the nervous part of me in the back of my mind that I'm going from training 4, 5, 6 hours a day to riding my bike as much as I want to, but I have other things taking my time. And so, I didn't want to balloon up. I didn't want to put on a lot of weight because I still enjoy riding. And I think it's advantageous to not be overweight to be a cyclist. It is certainly doable, but just knowing my capabilities, that's what I was aspiring towards. So just across the board, fueling myself well, real foods, not worrying about having an ice cream, not worrying about having a cookie. I mean, in fact, I think the vast majority of my rides these days revolve around knowing where the bakery is going to be on my ride and strategically planning where, okay, I'm going to be 2.5 hours in, and that's a good place to be looking for some refuel. And I'll certainly leave the house with food in my pockets. So that I'm trying to get one of our good mountain biking friends to buy a gravel bike with me. And I told her the real reason why I want to be a gravel biker is so we can stop at all the coffee shops and hit up the pastries, because you don't get that on the mountain bike. Yeah, you are in an amazing spot, especially as you migrate north and going up into southern Sonoma and Point Reyes Station. Oh man, you got some good bakeries there. Yeah. But people keep telling me too, like Marin, I guess if you go that way for sure, Marin's not really great for gravel biking. People keep telling me that. No, and that's the advantage of the gravel bike, is you're not purely riding it purely on gravel. A mountain bike is designed to be ridden on off roads. A gravel bike goes on pavement, off pavement. Just you get to choose your terrain, and therefore, like link together some gnarly stuff with plenty of pavement, and therefore link together those bakeries. Exactly. Link the bakeries. I'll get Juliet on board eventually. So, I mean, with that, out of curiosity, did you have kind of in your earlier years when you're, in Europe and stuff like that, was there someone there giving nutrition advice, or was it kind of like figure it out on your own? It's that had I don't want to keep on saying there's a big range, but there was a lot of range there too. I raced for 2 years for a very quintessentially Italian cycling team called Liquid Gas. And they had the old school mentality. That was certainly where lighter is better, full stop, no matter what. And so, we had a team doctor who would just literally hover over us and watch us as we ate. Wow. And that's at team camps and races. So you get to go home and not indulge, but fuel yourself properly in between these various team obligations. And counter that with, I was on another team that was really helpful in finding the right nutritionist and finding probably as simple as that, the right coaches, so that you could have the right nutrition plan for you, right? Yeah. Not everything is cookie cutter. So to have that kind of support was invaluable. And it was before my second Giro d'Italia, and to race your bike for call it literally 5-6 hours a day for 3 straight weeks, that takes a crazy undertaking. And I couldn't have been more well prepared than prior to that. So awesome. That's great. Yeah, that was terrific. I think that's the nutrition in sport has changed and come such a long way. And even just like the last 10 years, I think I remember when I was going through my undergrad, well, even for my undergrad, there was no such thing as a sports nutrition degree. Like it didn't exist yet. So people had to do adaptations of like double majors of kinesiology with clinical, and you still don't get any sports nutrition in that. You're learning about tube feeding portions and stuff like that for someone in a hospital setting. So to be able to see different sports now have sports nutrition, like race car drivers have sports nutritionists now, it's pretty incredible. So definitely evolving a lot, and happy to see that. So with your cycling career, obviously I'm sure this will tie into UnTapped, the business, but were there products that you were using during training and racing, and were those
like problematic for you or from a GI perspective, or tell us about that?
Great question. I have a pretty iron stomach, so
Mm.
the short answer is no.
Awesome.
And I was, you take what the team is sponsored by, and
Mhm.
and you go through, call it in a 6-hour race, you might go through 2 feed zones, and the peloton will slow down in that area, and each rider will go to their designated team support staff on the side of the road at 20 miles an hour and grab a bag of food and hydration. And what always drive me crazy is everybody would mindlessly eat their food or put the food into their jersey pockets and go about their next portion of racing. Over a 6-hour race, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of lulls in the race.
Yeah.
So there's fast stuff and there's slow stuff and there's intensity and there's non-intensity. And generally a feed zone is pretty low intense area. Not always, but generally it is. And so it drove me crazy that we couldn't just spend the next 10 minutes trading food with each other, almost like being on the playground and being like, I have had this bar 16 days in a row and I'm tired of it. Can I trade for yours? And I mean, I remember vividly having those thoughts. Every now and again, I would get some compatriot who spoke whatever shared language that I had. And we did make that trade, and that was fun.
Nice.
But the summary is you eat what is given to you, as simple as that. And that, there's the spectrum of sports food, gels, bars, gummies, the team's hydration products, and then what do you call paninis? Basically little sandwiches that are, full of a piece of ham and cheese and probably about yay big and maybe 100 calories. So
yummy.
They did try to mix it up, but it would be redundant.
Yeah. For sure. It makes me think of the Scratch cookbook.
Oh, sure.
I forget, I'm blanking on the name of it, but little like wrapped up rice cake goodie kind of things you can make. So when did UnTapped come into realization? Was that like in retirement, quote unquote retirement?
No, I call it retirement too, just because it is such a distinct line in the road from world tour racing to non. I'm born and raised in New Hampshire. I went to college in Vermont. I got into cycling in New England. And so New England's very much part of me. And I was the sole New Englander racing on the world tour stage at what I would call sort of the beginning phases of social media. And so on Twitter, this is certainly pre Instagram, etc. On Twitter, for whatever reason, I made it known that I was a New Englander, and probably by mentioning stuff like maple syrup regularly. So I got to the point that you go to these massive races, Tour of Flanders or Tour de France or Giro d'Italia, and you step off the team bus and it's a circus. I mean, there's 50 or 100,000 people there to be part of the race send-off. And very friendly American cycling tourists would come from the United States to Europe, come to these races, specifically come to our team bus and offer me a novelty, 5-ounce, 10-ounce container of maple syrup, because they knew that I was the maple syrup guy. And this stuff's invaluable in Europe. It's next to impossible to get. So it was awesome. I would take it back home. I would, keep it in the refrigerator, use it for traditional maple syrup uses, put it on my pancakes, put it on my oatmeal. And the flavor, the taste is so good that I found myself at certain times of the day going to the fridge and taking a little nip of it. And then I started putting it in my water bottle before I go for a bike ride. And it didn't take very long for me to say, well, goodness gracious, I have this gel that has 100 calories and a handful of nutrients as a result of 12 different ingredients. And then I have this maple syrup stuff, which is obviously some kind of carbohydrate. There's got to be a relationship here. And I'm probably soon after that, I started Googling sports nutrition maple syrup and finding out that it has all sorts of macronutrients, and that, these benefits go lengthy. The fact that it is water soluble makes it very easy on the stomach. It's low glycemic, so sort of extended path of energy. It is sucrose, so it breaks down in your body as glucose and fructose. Again, sort of that double pathway of energy. So I thought, genius, let's put maple syrup into this gel pack. And that began the very difficult part of the story. So, I'm spending 10 months out of the year in Europe. I don't have the bandwidth back in the States to to jumpstart everything. I would literally come back, visit my family around the holidays, go to farmers markets in New England and try to chat up maple syrup producers and say exactly what I just said. Let's take your maple syrup and put it in here.
Yeah.
So I think when I was at these farmers markets, they're relatively small operations and they're trying to sell a couple quart-sized things and go on with their day. And the punchline being, it was very difficult to get anyone to understand what I was trying to do, even though in my mind it was quite simple. So fast forward to a mutual friend suggested that I talk to this family named the Cochrans. The Cochrans have this long lineage of high-level Olympic alpine skiing. A lot of their family members have been to the Olympics, won Olympic gold, so on and so forth. There are 4 cousins who are roughly my age at the time and continue to be my age, obviously, who had just recently started. They'd retired from their ski careers and started a maple syrup operation on their family ski hill in Vermont.
Wow.
So they quickly got it up to 22,000 taps. And
wow.
The punchline being they were athletes who loved maple syrup and knew about maple syrup. And so that it was that Venn diagram overlap of they're athletes and they make maple syrup. They get that there's something bigger than just pancakes and oatmeal here.
Yeah. Genius.
Genius. It was the perfect meeting, the perfect confluence of that. So my career continued. This was 2013 that we first had the idea. We went to crowdfunding and used me racing the Tour de France as a pretty good jump off point.
Nice.
That was 2014 and been going gangbusters ever since. So of course, naturally I have it here. If you're not familiar with UnTapped,
yes,
this is the first product. It is 100% maple syrup in 100 calories in a easy to use energy pack. Tear it off, take your energy and hit the road.
Yeah.
We've now grown to 4 energy packs, 6 Stroop waffles, which is our answer to a bar, and then 2 drink mixes. And then,
yummy.
Much like maple syrup, it all hinges on real foods. So for example, we wanted a caffeinated gel. Instead of using caffeine, instead of using coffee flavoring, instead of using 16 other ingredients, we literally use maple syrup and coffee, and that's it.
I like it.
If we wanted a higher electrolyte product, we add sea salt. It is a very simple product, and I don't know your stance on natural flavors, but I'm not a big fan of the ingredient natural flavors, and so you'll never see that on our stuff. Like it tastes like lemons, coffee, cocoa, because these are all the ingredients that we use, the real food ingredient.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think with the way the sports nutrition stuff too has evolved a bit, it's you look at the label and it's fructose, glucose, maltodextrin, like it's not real stuff, right? It's not maple syrup, sea salt, cold brew coffee. People don't know what some of those things are, where they came from, or they're likely manufactured to some extent in a lab, or refined down. So definitely stripping them, like you're saying, of all these micronutrients, these other things that are in there. I would imagine with maple syrup, there's got to be some antioxidants, there's got to be different minerals, things like that you're not getting when you strip out and just plug in glucose and fructose into a gel or something like that. So yeah, I love the simplicity of it. I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly. I don't mean to interrupt, but I could talk maple syrup all day. There are 54 antioxidants, for example, in maple syrup, which is easy to remember because there are 54. It is 54 on the glycemic index. But what you often see in a traditional gel are those 12 ingredients, beginning with glucose, fructose, and then a bunch of ingredients with all sorts of that you just don't understand. Like, why is there citric acid in there? What is citric acid? Often citric acid is a derivation of fermented corn. And I don't know about you, but I don't know why I need fermented moldy corn in my sports nutrition.
Right.
So yeah, just having a greater understanding of why ingredients are in particular foods. Why do you need those stabilizers? It's certainly changed the way that I consume food in general, and then especially sports nutrition. Yeah,
I think that's great. And so you said you have gels, Stroop waffles, and hydration products as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So
awesome.
The full line.
Yeah, perfect. And are there caffeinated variations of the hydration as well?
Yeah, so the two drink mixes are lemon tea maple aid. Our product is called maple aid. So that has this base ingredient is maple syrup, and then real lemons, black tea, and sea salt. And
Wow.
so the caffeine naturally occurring from black tea. And then the other one is a higher electrolyte drink for those hot days, and that is called ginger maple aid, which is maple syrup, ginger, and sea salt. Ginger and maple syrup are a really good flavor profile, the two of them. And then ginger also has that naturally soothing effect on your stomach.
Definitely.
So that once you've had way too many non-untapped gels, you can soothe your stomach.
Exactly.
The number of customer service messages that we receive about folks who have made the migration to UnTapped and said, I never have had another GI issue again. It is moving. It is helpful. I wish everybody in the world knew that. And I think it has almost everything to do with not having all those synthetic ingredients in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have one of our client athletes. She's been using UnTapped forever and loves it. So
awesome.
I dig it. I'm super. I love the simplicity of it all. I think it's great. So with starting this business, I would imagine there was some testing. Were you just taking in maple syrup from the jug into a flask when you were going on your bike rides and stuff?
I do not recommend this, but I literally did one event with a glass, a novelty glass container in my jersey pocket, which thankfully I stayed upright through that entire event. Yeah, it's real world testing of real world foods. And so seeing what works, almost as simple as that. What tastes good? We don't have a lab. There's no lab at UnTapped headquarters. We have a kitchen, and we do a lot of taste testing and a heck of a lot of iterating. And you also want to keep up with trends, so you're not going to create a product that has 500 milligrams of caffeine. You're going to create a comparable caffeinated product. Yeah. So it's a mix of using real world food and ingredients to deliver what has become a very hyper scientific field, which is professional performance nutrition.
Yeah, definitely. So with the gels that you have, do you suggest a certain amount of consumption per hour of training for people, or does that fall?
We're backtracking a half hour in the conversation. You asked me what have I seen in over the course of what have I done personally over the course of my career, and I think we see more and more emphasis on a high, at least it's happening in cycling, or up to 100 milligrams of carbohydrate per hour. I think is the right terminology, what's happening. So really forcing it down. It's something you do need to train so that you're not purely going out in your first event and saying, oh gosh, I just ate way more than I've ever eaten before. But most certainly that's relatively easy with what we do recommend. As simple as, one, you can get by in an hour, obviously, on no nutrition. But one of these, if you're doing it per hour, if you're going beyond that, I'm often speaking to a cycling audience because that is my experience. But we do have a professional ultra runner in-house and a handful of other athletes. So what I do, I am 6'2" and 178 pounds. I'm a cyclist who likes to ride my bike a lot and often. I will do basically one every hour. One gel, one stroopwafel, and one bottle of maple aid every hour.
Nice.
And from there, fluctuate. If it's hot, you're drinking more. You can be drinking a heck of a lot more. If you're doing a higher intensity activity that might be a little bit shorter, and I'm not worried about quenching my appetite, I'll probably remove the stroopwafel and then add 2 or 3 of the energy packs.
Nice.
So this is all on untapped.cc. We have a pretty easy recommendation profile. Here is the baseline, and then fluctuate your needs as needed.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's helpful for a lot of people. Talking about hydration, out of curiosity, I think this might be helpful for people to hear as well. And I feel like I know the answer, but I just want you to say is, do you vary the amount of fluid you consume at different races?
100%.
So can you talk
Um,
about that? Yeah. I think people can get stuck on like one set amount and they're like, oh, I only need one bottle an hour. Can you tell us about maybe like the extremes that you've experienced?
yeah, I mean, I'll start with what's unanticipated is we've been spending a lot of time at altitude during the
Mm,
span trip, and I find myself oddly not drinking, and this is sort of
mm,
a duh moment. Obvious, maybe it's not obvious. You are expelling more of your body's hydration at high altitude than at sea level, and I'm riding short periods enough that it doesn't catch up with me.
mm-hmm,
But then that evening, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so gosh darn dehydrated that I'm
mm-hmm.
really making up for lost time. Um, and I shouldn't have prefaced with that because I'm very in tune with my body's needs in general. Like I don't need to set a timer on my cycling computer or on my watch saying you need to eat every
Mm,
15, 20 minutes.
mm-hmm,
To answer the question more specifically, like I said, my baseline is 1 bottle per hour.
mm-hmm,
Um, I can, at a really hot, intense, longer race, I can be doing more than 2 bottles per hour. And a large cycling bottle is 24 ounces typically.
mm-hmm.
Um, so the really long ones where you know you're going to be long races, where you know you're going to be digging yourself into a dehydration hole over the course of call it 200 miles,
Yeah.
you are incredibly dehydrated by the end.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're racing with two bottles and a hydration pack. I mean, these are high exposure events in high
Mm-hmm,
heat. So
mm-hmm.
basically smack in the middle of America in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
We also live in Vermont where it is very cold, and I do ride or exercise year round. So
Mm-hmm.
in general, I'm consuming a bit less, but hydration is still plenty important in the winter as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's not meant to be a chore. So getting an insulated bottle and putting some sort of hot, I do
Mm-hmm.
recommend the hot ginger maple aid.
Yeah.
That's sort of universally loved when it's cold outside.
I love that.
Um, yeah, I couldn't disagree. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think people are perpetually dehydrated
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
live by one set of rules.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, have you done any sweat testing throughout
I
your
have not.
career?
I'm very familiar with it,
Yeah.
but I have not personally done that.
No weighing like pre and post training sessions or anything like that either. No.
No,
No.
no, not on a formal level. I mean, yeah, there have been
Yeah.
some times that I will finish a ride and I'll say, in general, in my post world tour career, I don't get on a scale, but
Yeah.
every now and again I will just on a really hot ride be like, wow, I wonder if I lost 10 pounds today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's
pretty incredible. I mean, how much fluid people can lose in different conditions too. I think that's so important for people to realize, sea level, it's nice and there's moisture in the air. And then you go,
mhm,
like you're saying, to altitude and it's 82 degrees. Like your fluid losses could easily double.
mhm.
It's pretty wild.
And
Um,
similar, I mean, I brought it up a second ago, but similar in the winter. I mean, the air, even in sea level, humid New England in the winter is
right.
so dry that, yeah, you are
Yeah.
just sort of breathing it on out.
Yes. Yeah. We lose. I think people don't realize that. Yeah. You lose with each breath that you exhale, you're losing like the water droplets right to
Hmm.
the dry air. So
Exactly.
talking about hydration and fueling, the most recent race you just did was RPI, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Can you tell us like what your fueling and hydration looked like for something like that? And how long was the race?
Yeah, that was a hot and dry 102-mile event.
Oh my goodness.
I want to say there's two or three rest stops along the way.
Mm,
And as gravel has gotten more and more competitive, the rest stops are used more infrequently. And
mm,
because you can't, the short answer is you can't dedicate 30 seconds to refueling when you
mm,
could be carrying that food and hydration with you. So I
yeah.
think we stopped once over the 102 miles.
Hmm.
At that point, I'm using that baseline benchmark, one gel per hour, one
Hmm.
scoop waffle per hour, and one drink per hour.
Nice.
I probably went. That's a good example of I didn't bring a hydration pack, so I know that I was under hydrated.
Mm,
And then I'm of the opinion that I want to be able to drink right up to the point that I'm getting into that fuel stop, as opposed to
hmm.
chugging it and then being without the ability to quench my thirst for the next
Yeah.
45 minutes or whatever it is. Um, that race starts very intensely. You go up about what feels like a 10-mile mountain.
Mm.
And so quickly prior to the climb, prior to that big piece of intensity, that's where I might only be 10 minutes into the race, but I'm immediately taking a gel. I want my sugar stores to be topped up. And then right when you get to the top, because it's been difficult to eat over the course of the 10 miles, then by all means, I'm going to be refueling quite a bit there. So yeah, it is a rule of thumb where you might be consuming food and hydration over that hour, but just not being able, making sure you don't forget, once you have missed the window, it's very hard to make up for that kind of deficit.
Yeah. How many bottles were you able to carry on your bike?
I carried 2. There were a few folks who did have hydration packs just to blaze through those feed zones. And occasionally folks have 3, but 2 is very traditional, and that's what made sense for me. It's again that strength to weight ratio. It's like you don't want to be carrying too much fluid, but then you run the risk of running out, and then you're up another creek. So
yes, yeah, exactly. We have some of our triathletes run into that same issue. They want to keep it light. Over that race, then does that mean you consumed like 6 or more bottles? Do you think?
That's a safe bet. Yeah, when we did stop, we had a cordial group where we were able to stop long enough that I could fill both bottles and chug a bottle. Nice. So yeah, I mean, again, I do that because I have both an iron stomach. I'm not going to say, oh, I have too much hydration in my belly.
Yeah.
But knowing that I'm already at a deficit, so just trying to make up for what I've already lost. Yeah, not the best. Well, I'd say it had just shy of 6 bottles, and that's just shy of a 6-hour race. So
nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And what did breakfast look like for you that morning? Do you remember? Was it just maple syrup and pancakes?
Without remembering specifically, I think oatmeal is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
That as a result of, we have a 3-month-old and 2.5-year-old.
Oh,
and
wow.
So as a very early start to that day, and my wife is a competitive cyclist as well.
Oh my goodness.
It makes for early starts and a lot of acting on the fly. Or, I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of pre-planning that goes into everything. But that morning, oatmeal is as easy as anything. So oatmeal, coffee is a guarantee, and then link up with a babysitter and zip off to the races.
There you go. Genius. And at that race, you were not, I'm doing air quotes, but you're not racing. You were doing something a little bit different. Can you tell us what was going on there?
The 2022 season has been a little bit different from some normal ones or any season prior to this for me. As a result of, in mid-July, I was diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot that has made its way through my body and ultimately into my lungs, which is not a fun thing to know that I'm breathing on 1.5 lungs as opposed to 2 full. But the much more important upshot is that I'm on blood thinners. And so the front of a bike race tends to be a dangerous place to occupy space. I mean, the risk is high because these races are more and more competitive. I still feel very comfortable getting on my bike and riding my bike, and that's a big reason why my wife and family and I are doing this summer tour. It's a tour to places and races that traditionally we'd be racing, but now my wife is racing and I'm doing things a little bit differently. Awesome. So beginning with the last best ride in Montana, and then continuing that with RPI in Idaho, 2 weeks later, I've been doing some call it benevolent fundraising adventures along the way. In each of those events, I've done this thing where I start dead last and have a period of time where I let people begin racing, and then I say ready, set, go, and get an official send off and basically catch as many riders as I can and donate money based on the number of riders that I pass. Especially at RPI, it was cool because I've gotten some sponsors involved. And so Velocio Clothing, for example, that's my apparel sponsor. Awesome. They donated $1 for every rider I passed, which was 600. Wow. And then they've offered up a discount to everybody who supports and donates to my fundraising page. And they donated 6 $500 gift cards to Velocio, which is impressive. That'll get you a heck of a lot of clothing.
Definitely.
So all said and done, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Selfishly, personally, it's a really great way for me to continue riding and moving and being at events, and it gives me the same stoke, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that surprised me. The outpouring of support has been incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I raised over $10,000 at last best ride, and
Wow.
$5,500 at RPI,
Amazing.
and it's been really unique and neat and different, and gets your mind moving in different ways as
Yeah.
much as it's able to get my body moving.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. And so the fundraising, can you tell us a little bit more about what the fundraising is for?
Sure. So they've been different at each one. And this was
Mm,
very last minute when we created the idea.
mm,
We knew we were going to Montana. My wife is very good friends with Just Sarah, who runs the Last Best
mm,
Ride.
mm-hmm,
We were going to go out there regardless. Whitefish, Montana in the summer is a great place to be.
mm-hmm,
So as we're driving across the country, thinking like, what am I going to do? Am I going to ride it? Am I going to
mm,
participate? Am I going to cheer on the side? And I thought, well, yeah, let's create something where I could, yeah, let's do $1 per person I pass. So I
yeah.
said I will donate $1 per person that I pass. A whole handful of people immediately came out of the woodwork. They said they'd match it, and so that's why we were able to get
Amazing.
up to that 10,000 number. For that one, we were donating to the Last Best Ride Scholarship, which is a scholarship that supports Black, Indigenous, women of color.
Mm,
I mean, just folks in the Whitefish area. We think of it as a beautiful tourist spot, but
mm-hmm,
there are people who have certainly greater needs than
mm-hmm,
what I've been blessed with. So
mm-hmm.
this supports that group. You can look them up at thelastbestride.com.
Awesome.
And then Rebecca Rush, who created RPI, Rebecca's Private Idaho, has any number of benevolent organizations that she's part of. So her big thing is the Be Good Foundation,
Mm-hmm,
which is a very cool thing that has a lot to do with her father, who was shot down in Vietnam, and the giving back and supporting
mm-hmm,
of any number of things. I highly
mm-hmm.
recommend you check out the Be Good Foundation.
Yeah.
And it's been a work in progress, because I told Rebecca, hey, what we had great success with at Last Best Ride, I don't purely want to recreate it. So
Mm-hmm,
like this will quickly, what do you call it? Donor fatigue is a thing. Like I can't purely say, hey, I'm going to another event. People
mm-hmm.
pony up more money. So
Right.
that's what was really great about Velocio becoming involved and people
Mm,
having incentives. Because then fast forward to just shy of 1 month from today, October 15th is the King Challenge, which is a
okay.
ride that I started in 2011.
Wow.
So yeah, coming on our 12th year of the ride. That
Wow.
it's purely a charity ride. We are and it's super fun. It's great for the whole family. We got a 10,
Mm-hmm.
30, and 60-mile ride. This is in
Wow.
Seacoast, New Hampshire. And that benefits a group called the Krempel Center, which
Mm,
is an organization that benefits adults living with brain injury.
wow.
My dad had a stroke 19 years ago, and that's still
Wow.
just heart-wrenching for our family, and a really
Wow.
difficult thing that we struggle through and work with every day. But the Krempel Center,
Yeah.
it really benefits those families.
Wow.
So yeah, as we go event to event, I'm thinking, okay, these are awesome events, and I'm really glad to support. And then ultimately, how can I support this big end of the season event, the King
Right.
Challenge?
Yeah.
So all of the above. Yeah, check out Last Best
Amazing.
Ride, Rebecca's Private Idaho, and by all means,
Yeah.
kingchallenge.org.
With the King Challenge, can people do that virtually?
They can, yeah, you can ride virtually. Obviously, not everybody is in New England, but New
Yeah.
England in the fall is a hard place to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah, all details kingchallenge.org.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll include all of this stuff in the show notes for everyone. And then
Nice.
just for perspective too, for our listeners, kind of touching back on RPI, not racing, but for every one person you pass, donating $1, how many people did you pass at RPI of the total contenders? I remember hearing
Well,
something like crazy bananas.
yeah, that was kind of awesome, because I had well, let me give you the answer. I passed and we donated $600. So that was purely from donations. At
Amazing.
the start line, I'd already had $2,400 donated. So that was
Wow.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the aftermath, we're up to, yeah, north of 5,000.
Wow.
Because the race started pretty slowly. The peloton, so to speak,
Mhm.
moved out pretty slowly. And I started 10 minutes later and went gangbusters as fast as I could. I literally passed everybody.
Oh my
So I
God.
got to the very front, which surprised me as well. And
Yeah.
so I'm laughing and I took a picture. But then that's where the race starts.
Yeah.
I caught him at the base of the hill, and then the race really begins. And so
Yeah.
then, truth be told, I finished 16th. So I guess we
Oh
must
my
have had
goodness.
616
Wow.
participants. So yeah, I
That's
actually had a
pretty
good
incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. And also I've been watching some of your YouTube videos too, so I encourage people to go check those out. But I've seen on your YouTube videos, it was probably the last best ride, I think, the one I was watching, where people knew that you were doing that, right, and just passing
Yeah,
you dollar bills as you pass by them. I thought that
that
was pretty
was
great.
that was hilarious. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think if I had stopped for every person who literally started the race with a dollar bill in their pocket, I would not have passed as many people because there were so many people doing it. And that each
Yeah.
one of those would start a conversation, then I'd have to move
Yeah.
on and move on. So I'd
Yeah.
go by people, they'd say, I have $1. I said, meet me
Oh
at
my
the
God.
finish line.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the outpouring of support through these projects has been
Yeah.
tremendous.
That's awesome. So I want to be respectful of your time here because we're getting close on the hour, but what's coming up for you next I mean, obviously you mentioned the King Challenge. I would
Mhm.
imagine you're doing that. Anything else coming up for you in the racing or UnTapped world or anything like that?
Um, we've I'm in my cousin's house now and I look out the window and see our van. We're both living this crazy spastic life on the road. And so we look forward to the next movement, which is going to
Mhm.
be probably west back deeper into the Rockies. And then
Mhm.
ultimately, Gravel Locos is an event
Mhm.
in Pueblo, Colorado, October 1st. I'm
Nice.
most certainly going to do that. Great event. Even if you haven't signed up, you can still sign up. Check out
Yeah.
Gravel Locos.
Awesome.
From there, start moving east. October 15th is the King Challenge.
Mm.
Um, Tying in UnTapped the following week. So let's say October 23rd is Big Sugar, which is a big national caliber race in Bentonville, Arkansas. And if
Oh,
you're not
okay.
familiar with Bentonville, Arkansas, it has become the cycling hotbed
I've
across
heard.
the country. It's
Yeah.
wild what's happening there. We are the official nutrition sponsor for that event,
Amazing.
so that's a great one. I don't know. My family lives such a on the go lifestyle that it's a one of contrast because there's times you're like, oh, we just want to calm down, but then as soon as we're home for 3 days, we're like, where to next? So
Yes.
I don't know. The fall is certainly a time to slow down, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll begin looking at a calendar and say where and when can we do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we will include links to all of these things in the show notes, but where can people find you I mean, you have a podcast, you have a YouTube, Instagram, there's on tap.
Yeah.
Where can people find you in all these spots?
Um, as simple as all things, I am Ted King. So I am tedking.com. All of my social media is I am Ted King. I'll throw you for a little loop. The podcast is King of the Ride,
Mm.
and I don't even know what my YouTube is, but if you searched Ted King on YouTube, hopefully you'd find me.
Yeah.
Yeah, all things I am Ted King.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ted. This is super fun chat with you, and I'm sure lots of information for some of our listeners on proper hydration and fueling needs too. So thank you so much for joining us.
Very much appreciated. Thanks for taking the time.